Hi, welcome to Algebra 2's Solving Absolute Value Equations. This is Chapter 1, Section 4, the first video in your next unit. So make sure you're taking your notes as you're supposed to. Now, the first thing we have to make sure we know is that to solve an absolute value equation, you have to have a positive and a negative version. Okay, and the reason is because whenever we're talking about an absolute value, we're talking about its distance from zero. And that could be positive or negative, right? If you have you could take the absolute value of 5 and negative 5 and get 5. So we don't know which one, so we have to take into account both possibilities. Now, whenever you're solving an absolute value, you could have an extraneous solution. An extraneous solution is an apparent solution that must be rejected because it does not satisfy the original equation. And that's why we check every single time we solve an absolute value. So we're going to solve the absolute value of 3x minus 6 minus 9 equals negative 3. Now remember, you cannot distribute anything into an absolute value, ever. Never, ever, ever. You can also not take anything out, unless it is by itself and you're splitting it up to solve. For example, right here, my step 1 is to isolate the absolute value. So first, isolate absolute value. What that means is we have to get this by itself. Well, that negative 9 is in our way, so we have to add it. So that gets rid of that 9 on the other side. So we now have the absolute value of 3x minus 6 equaling 6. Then we're going to do exactly what we did in the simple example. It's going to take a few more steps. So really it's not that much more complicated. We have 3x minus 6 equals 6. There's our positive version. And negative 3x minus 6 equals 6. And we just solve each one separately from there. But we have to make sure we remember both the positive and the negative. That's the part that's going to mess everybody up. So don't forget. This is very important. So to the left we add 6. We get that 3x equals 12 divided by 3. I'm giving away the answer because x equals 4. On the right hand side we're going to distribute that negative to get negative 3x plus 6 equals 6. We subtract 6 from both sides. So that negative 3x equals 0. Well, 0 divided by anything is simply 0. So these are two possibilities. Possibility 1, possibility 2. We have to check. Check your solutions every single time. Every single time. I know it can be tedious, it can take some extra time, but it's necessary because you could always end up with an extraneous solution and you never know until you check it. So I'm going to start with option number 1. We have the absolute value of 3, and all you do is take the number, so for in this case 4, and plug it into your original equation. So I have the absolute value of 3 times 4 instead of x, minus 6, minus 9, and I have to ask myself, does that equal negative 3? Well, 3 times 4, 12, and I'm just going to do it step by step. Does that equal negative 3? Well, 12 minus 6, that's 6. Does that equal 3? Negative 3. Well, the absolute value of 6 is just 6, so 6 minus 9, that does equal negative 3, so that is a valid answer. So now I can come over here and I can highlight it and say, yes, that is an answer. For the second one, now I'm going to plug in 0 instead. So we're going to have 3 times 0 minus 6 minus 9. Does that equal negative 3? And the reason I have the little question mark over the top is because at this point in time, I'm not sure whether or not it actually equals 3. So I need to make sure I keep going. Well, 3 times 0 is 0. So we have the absolute value of negative 6. And then the absolute value of negative 6 is simply 6. So 6 minus 9, and we're back where we were on the last one, and it does equal 3. So, negative 3. We have two answers. We have that x equals 4 and x equals 0. But that doesn't always happen. So let's go to the next one and try again. For this one, the only difference between this and the last one is that now we have a letter on the other side. So our little math is going to be different, but ultimately you're doing the exact same thing. So let's make sure we know how to do it. First, is it isolated? Is it isolated? Well, then you have to ask yourself, is there anything out front? Nope. Is there anything in the back? Nope. Then we're good. We don't have to worry about it. We simply have to keep going. Remember, we have a positive version and a negative version, so we need to set that up. 3n plus 12 equals 2n, and negative 3n plus 12 equals 2n. All we have to do is solve from here. So I want to get all of my n's onto one side and all of my numbers onto the other. But what happens is I need to make sure that I don't end up confusing myself. So I'm going to take this 3n right here, and I'm going to go ahead and subtract it from both sides so that I don't end up with 0 on one side. So 12 equals negative n. But I have a negative n and I need to solve for a positive n, so we're going to divide by negative 1 so that n equals negative 12. Then we're going to come over here. We're going to distribute the negative. We get negative 3n minus 12 equals 2n. Add 3n to both sides so that negative 12 equals 5n. Divide by negative 12, and you get that, oops, I don't want to divide by negative 12, I'm sorry. You divide by 5, because we want the n by itself. So that n equals negative 12 over 5. Now, we have to try both of these. We definitely do. So we have the 1 version and the 2 version, and we're going to plug them in, see if we have any extraneous solutions. When I plug it in, once again, I'm just plugging it into my original function. So we have 3 times negative 12 plus 12. And we're trying to see if that equals 2 times negative 12. Well, we know that 3 times negative 12 is negative 36 plus 12. And if you don't know that, make sure you're using a calculator. We're trying to see if that equals negative 24. Well, negative 36 plus 12 is negative 24. So maybe that would work, except that the absolute value of any number is going to be a positive number. So these will never, ever be the same. So this over here, that's not an answer. Now, because of that, let's do the second one. 3, negative 12 over 5. And you would have to do the second one regardless of whether or not it actually worked out. Right? We have to check to see if either answer is a solution. And if neither answer is, we'll see what happens. So, right here, when I get here, I'm thinking negative 36 over 5 plus 12. Does that equal a negative 24 over 5? Well, to answer my question very quickly and efficiently, I'm just going to say no. Because you can never have an absolute value equal to a negative number. Because by definition, the absolute value of a number is the positive version of that number. So these are both wrong, and our answer is no solution. So there's our answer. Okay, last one, last example. We are going to have 2 absolute values, and that just means that you're going to take one of them and you're going to make one of them negative and one of them positive, just like we did before. The only difference is that you just pick one, right? It doesn't matter which one. So here, we're going to have that 2r minus 4 equals the positive version of 2r plus 10, and it also equals the negative version. So 2r minus 4 equals negative 2r plus 10. Okay, so when I solve this one on the left, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2r from both sides. Those go away, and negative 4 equals 10. Well, that is absolutely not true. So that's not going to give us any kind of answer at all. On the other side, maybe we'll get something over here. We're going to distribute that negative so that we get 2r minus 4 equaling negative 2r minus 10. We add 2r to both sides. Those go away, and we get 4r equaled minus 4 equaling negative 10. We add 4 to both sides, so that 4r equals negative 6 divided by 4, and r equals negative 6 over 4, which can be simplified to negative 3 over 2. If you're not familiar with your fractions, make sure you have a calculator, right? We have resources. Then we're going to plug that in to negative so that our x, or our r, is negative 3 over 2. So we get the minus 4. Does that equal 2 times negative 3 over 2 plus 10? And I hope you noticed that when I plugged it into this problem, I'm plugging it into both the left and the right side. And the reason I do that is because there's an r in both the left and the right side. So if you don't plug it into both, you're not going to get an accurate representation of what's actually going on. Now, whenever you multiply 2 by 3 over 2, the 2's go away, and you end up with negative 3. Right? If you don't know that, brush up on your fractions. Again, the 2's go away because they're the same on top and bottom. So they're going to cancel each other out. We get negative 3 plus 10. And then on the left side, we end up with negative 7 absolute value. Does that equal the absolute value of 7? Well, since the absolute value of a positive and a negative number is both positive, then yes, 7 does equal 7. And we're good. And this is our answer. That's it. Have a wonderful day.